Welcome to Hamilton Works. I'm your host, Al Lutchin. We've been doing a special series on volunteerism here in Greater Hamilton. And did you know that here in the city of Hamilton, we have one of the largest per capita of volunteer rates in the entire country, and that's something to be really proud of. And so this is the last of our series, and we're going to be speaking with Mayor Fred Eisenberger from the city of Hamilton and Melanie Winterle, who is a leadership specialist and an affiliate with Marshall Connects. Welcome to you both.
Good to be here.
And Melanie, I'd like to thank you very much for all the help you've been in co-producing this series.
Thank you very much. You know, it's a passion of mine, so yes, anybody to talk to is a good thing. So thank you for the opportunity.
Mayor Eisenberger, let's start with you. How important has volunteerism been to your career?
You know what, for my career, I mean, what I've been able to witness in the broader community has been actually spectacular. This city wouldn't work without the kind of huge amount of volunteerism that happens, whether it's in the hospital sector or in the government sector, in our recreation centers, all the way through to sports volunteers in terms of soccer and all the organizations out there that are operating. 56, 57%, you mentioned the high kind of turnout for volunteerism. Of our population, 56% turns out to volunteer. That's huge. So our city wouldn't function without volunteers. And my volunteerism over the years has been with not-for-profit organizations like Green Venture and creative arts, kind of areas that I'm particularly interested in. And you know what, and you find that when you volunteer, it feels good to do good, and you know what, you get more out of it than you actually put into it. And that's kind of my bottom line message for anyone that's thinking about it is, don't think about necessarily about what you're giving, because that's important, but you get a lot back in return.
Melanie, there's been a lot of changes in volunteerism over the past 10 years. Tell us about it.
Well, I specifically like what Mayor Eisenberger just said, because volunteering is not a transaction. It actually is a relationship. We have, I've had a chance to work with Volunteer Canada over the course of the past 4 or 5 years, and some of the conversations we've been undertaking is, has the word volunteer fallen out of fashion? And a group of us sat around from different volunteer centers across the country and really tried to hash out what the value is of volunteerism. Not the monetary value, because we know that that's a great amount, but really what is happening when someone gives their time. And I think at the end of the day we decided, and of course this is still up for conversation, but at the end of the day the word volunteer hasn't fallen out of fashion. In fact, what volunteers do these days is really different than perhaps what our grandparents might have done as volunteers.
And what do you think the trends are in volunteerism going forward?
There's quite a few, actually. So we have entrepreneurial volunteers, and we had individuals on this show in a previous episode, such as Larry Pomeritz from Earth Day Hamilton and Leo Johnson from Empowerment Squared. And these are individuals who have gone out into their community and created something new that wasn't there before, based on something that they had seen and witnessed, and realized that there's an opportunity to build community. And so they created their own volunteer position, but then also gathered the people that they needed to help them build an organization. And so now it's an organization that does really good work in the community.
And so, Mayor, you were talking about the importance of volunteerism to Hamilton. I'm just interested in your perspective. What is the spirit of it all here in Hamilton? Why do you think we are the top-rated volunteerism city in the country, which is a phenomenal thing to reach?
It is, and I think Hamilton kind of fits into that category of a larger city, but still a small town feel to it. That you know, people are friendly and neighborly, and you know, they don't mind talking to their neighbor in the elevator, as opposed to where, you know, a much bigger city where people tend to be in their own zone. We, I think, are much more open, much more friendly, much more giving. And I think that reflects in the volunteerism that we see in our broader community. I mean, our entire neighborhood redevelopment plan is basically founded on volunteerism of neighbors coming together, participating in revamping and re-engineering and re-energizing their neighborhoods. Without that kind of thrust of neighborly kind of participation, none of that would work. So it seems to be kind of the foundation of what Hamilton is, and it seems to continue to grow. It doesn't get smaller, it seems to get bigger. And I think because of there are some trends that are happening also on the kind of the younger volunteer side, and a lot of that sometimes could be kind of career-oriented, where they start to volunteer early. There's, as you know, a kind of a mandatory volunteerism requirement through the high school, through your grade school, high school career. And I think that's translating into their understanding the importance of volunteerism, and they turn that into kind of volunteerism for the rest of their lives. So I think that participation in the school and the high school, I think, leads to kind of active participation throughout their entire history here in Hamilton.
Becomes like a lifestyle.
A habit, yeah, a habit that's hard to break because it feels so good.
Yeah. So, Melanie, speaking about lifestyles and volunteerism, is this something that you see that's going to continue, say, over the next decade?
I certainly hope so. I think that we live in a world of diminishing resources, no matter what sector you're working in. And I think we need to volunteer our time effectively and mindfully, but I think we're going to have to depend on those who volunteer their time and their gifts. So I see it as a trend that's just starting to build, and I think it's actually the human capital aspect of it we really haven't tapped into yet, and I think it's almost boundless. It's just a matter of how you cultivate that nature and how do you glean those gifts from people.
And you were saying at one point you were at a conference where they thought the word volunteer was kind of old and should be replaced.
That's right. And again, it gets down to the definitions. Okay, so if the word volunteer isn't what we use, what would we use? And we're not sure what that word would be, but we do know that people are doing things differently. We mentioned that there's a strong youth initiative happening, and they're very entrepreneurial in their approach. We have Zoomers who have a lot of energy and skills that we're not really tapping into yet. So I don't think the word itself, although there was a few blogs that I had presented that said, yes, the word volunteer is old and done, but it's not. It's actually who's doing what. That's the difference.
Yeah, so the word volunteer, Fred, is probably something that's going to continue on for a very long time because it is what it is, right?
Yeah, you know what? It's not so much about the word, it's about what it actually means and how people translate that into doing something good in their community. So an emerging trend, I think, is, we're baby boomers, myself, yourself, others. We're hitting the retirement age, and many of us are retiring early than we have in the past to our good fortune. And there are going to be a lot of aging seniors in our community with a lot of talent that I think are going to start kicking in terms of wanting to give back. I think it's kind of the 60s generation of us wanting to be and having a more active role in the kind of the political evolving of our communities. And I think that's now going to be translated into folks that are in early retirement that are going to be looking for ways of giving back to their community in a big way. Whether it's monetarily, but I think more importantly on a volunteer basis and sharing their knowledge and expertise with the next generation or the community at large. I think that's going to be a huge, huge drive coming forward, because we know our population is going to be about 40% retired folks over 60. That's a large number based on where it is now. It's going to continue to grow, and that's a knowledge base that is going to be very valuable going forward.
Yeah, just picking up, Melanie, on what the mayor was saying in terms of the older demographics coming back to do more volunteerism and so on. It's almost like a great sort of mentorship opportunity for younger generation as well.
I would say so, although I think the younger generation are strong enough, not strong enough, but they kind of don't want to be mentored by us. They actually have their own ideas. But I do believe that you're absolutely right. There are people who will be looking to give back to their community, but don't ask them to stuff an envelope and don't ask them to pour tea. These are captains of industry, to use a phrase. These are people who have had very successful careers and have something to offer that can really build on the resources of any organization.
So I guess it's something for people to consider when they're looking for volunteers, just about that point about, let's just not stuff envelopes, that we really have to find meaningful roles for, as you were saying, Mayor, experts who have had lifelong careers and now have time to give back.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of community building, there are so many areas that talented people or past leaders or captains of industry, engineers, planners can participate in many different ways in terms of helping build communities throughout our entire city. They'll do it for nothing, and that talent and those resources are extremely valuable. But we also have the ability of those young, I mean, it's almost like a coming together of generations here that I think has aging energy, a lot of retirees that have a lot of energy and enthusiasm for their community, and a lot of new emerging talent that wants to have that wisdom and experience. And if you can marry those two together, I think we're essentially unstoppable.
So Melanie, are we talking about increased citizen engagement?
And I guess that's, probably where we're talking about, maybe that's where the word volunteer is sort of shifted, because we talk less about volunteerism and more about the engagement piece. And really, when I talk about engagement, I really think of people becoming awake to the fact that they don't live outside of their communities. They actually belong to their communities, and hopefully they have a chosen sense of accountability for community. And by having that, they realize that there's a role for them to play, not because it's a nice thing to do, but actually, just by the very fact that I belong to this community, I should be participating in a volunteer activity.
I guess that's a key piece with the city too, Mayor, the engagement piece.
Yeah, it's a really big piece. Certainly from where I sit, having citizens more engaged in decision making and fashioning their own communities, and what people care about most is the neighborhood they live in. And, some people have that broader, a desire to get involved on a bigger picture, but I think by and large people care about their neighborhood. What's the neighborhood park look like? Are they accessible to me? What's my recreation center like? Am I participating in any of that? I think that kind of engagement is going to get bigger and bigger. And you know what? The resources out there to make it easy to do now through the internet, through social media or Twitter or Instagram, or pick your poison here. There are so many different ways to get information and share information that the ability for people to engage is much easier now than it has been ever in the past. So I see that whole world of engagement opening up to the benefit of our city. Quite frankly, the more that people are engaged, the better we become.
Melanie, who should people contact if they want to be a volunteer, but maybe they just don't know what they want to do?
Volunteer Hamilton would be a great place to start. Actually, it's Volunteer Hamilton Center for Community Engagement, because they recognize the fact that engagement is where people become plugged into the community. So you can go to their website, which is volunteerhamilton, all one word, .on.ca, and you can go through their database, and there's hundreds of opportunities there at any one time from over 200 agencies. And so you can match your skill set from the time that you're available to maybe the cause that you're interested in. So there's a really good database to go to, but if that doesn't work for you, you can actually pick up the phone and give them a call, and someone will help you make a good connection.
Mayor, relative to the engagement piece, and you were talking about the importance of this, with people wanting to have better neighborhoods and so on. Do you encourage people to get out more? I mean, we often hear, come out to a meeting about, whatever it is, whether it's a rapid transit or whatever. Mm-hmm. Is that something that people should really be focused on and get involved with?
Yeah, in part, and as I said a minute ago, I mean, we should be better at reaching out to people through all the different social media platforms. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to physically be there all the time for you to be engaged. So being engaged is being aware of what's happening in your community, and then the next step is, if you want to be more actively participating on a one-to-one basis, then you could physically be there. But we have to, as organizations, make sure that we open up those platforms so that people can engage through various different means. And so whether it's, we're kicking off a citizens jury process on transportation right now, on transit. That's one way of doing it. Another way is that through social media, through the internet and Twitter, we could have sites on there that ask questions of people in the community in terms of what your preferences are and desires are, and then share information about all the programs that we have ongoing out there. Our website is pretty interactive now, more than it was in the past. It's pretty good now. So all of those tools, I think we as a government ought to be using to pull people into the process. And the more that we pull people in, the better they have the ability to actually shape their own communities.
And Melanie, I'm sure you agree with that. So social media, do you see that as playing a sort of a bigger piece in attracting volunteers in the future and getting them engaged?
I do think so. I think that those communication vehicles also give people a chance to have a voice, and then they seek out others who have the same voice. And then by the fact that they can seek each other out, they can actually then have conversations around, what would be the preferred future for our community. So it is a good communications piece, but I see it also being used as an activist piece. People are weighing in on topics, and certainly it's immediate, right? You pick up your handheld, whatever device that is, and you send a tweet, and immediately you're connected to other people who think the same way. So I do think that is a tool that can be leveraged even more so.
And in your opinion, Melanie, what do you think the sort of the top two drivers are for volunteerism? Why do people do it?
What a great question. I think that the top two might be different for every person that you talk to. So For myself personally, it's because I want a sense of belonging to my community. I want to be able to have a voice in my community and be able to contribute something that's meaningful. Someone who may be just starting out in their career may wish to be working on their social network, or may be wishing to try out a new career or some skills. You know, maybe if I was to find something else, something new in the volunteer role, maybe it would be doing something that I haven't done before, because then I could practice, right? And so there's every number of reasons for every person that might consider taking on a volunteer role.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you both very much for coming in and talking about volunteerism, and really proud of all the work that you both do in the community, in and around volunteerism. More on Hamilton Works when we return right after this.
One, two. Good rhythm back and forth. Hey Taylor, I think you might need this.
Thanks.
Letters, rebound, scores! Taylor Hall!
In Canada, more than 13 million volunteers contribute over 2 billion hours every year. Volunteers support us in everything we do, and communities thrive because of it. At Volunteer Canada, we encourage and strengthen community involvement. We work with a broad range of partners to promote and support our shared vision of a vibrant Canada. To learn more, visit thenewvolunteer.ca, your connection to Canada's volunteering community.
Welcome back to Hamilton Works on Cable 14. I'm your host, Al Lutchin, and we've been doing a special series on volunteerism here in Hamilton, and the fact that Hamilton actually ranks basically #1 in Canada in relation to per capita volunteerism, and that's a pretty major feat. And so to talk about why we are at where we're at with volunteerism and where we're going is Alyssa Lai, who's a board member and a volunteer herself at the Hamilton Center for Community Engagement. Welcome, Alyssa.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Al.
So tell us why you think Hamilton does so well with volunteerism. It's been one of my key questions throughout the whole series, and I'm just interested in it from your take.
I think it's a passion and engagement of the community, and there's really individuals doing so many different things, right? I like to think of volunteerism as a blank canvas. So it's really up to you to make it as what you want to be in terms of your interests, but also the kinds of organizations and groups that you want to volunteer for. And Volunteer Hamilton is a great organization for that, because really it connects you with those opportunities and also networks that will provide you with those opportunities.
So what kinds of things can people, become connected with through Volunteer Hamilton? Like, just give us an idea of kind of how you work and what you do.
Yep, absolutely. So with Volunteer Hamilton Center for Community Engagement, it's all about promoting volunteerism and also engaging the volunteers themselves. So there is an online matching database where we pair volunteers with opportunities available there. And organizations could post opportunities through our online database. But beyond that matching, we also do other things. So we run the Snow Angels program, which is essentially a volunteer engagement program for seniors to engage engage volunteers, and also, to offer opportunities to lend a helping hand to shovel snow for seniors in need and people with disabilities. In addition to that, as part of our service, we also offer support for community organizations who are looking to launch their own volunteer program, for instance, needing help and some guidance on how to actually do a well-oiled volunteer program, and from the beginning to the inception, where you start a volunteer program, to the point where how do you engage it, how do you recruit, and how do you acknowledge it. And to tie in with acknowledgement, we host the annual Community Builders Breakfast, which is happening during National Volunteer Week.
And what's that all about?
That's all about honoring and celebrating Hamilton's tireless volunteers, and really looking at the impact that they have. This year's theme is called Volunteerism, the Ripple Effect. So looking at the ripple effect of volunteers and what they do for the community, because like throwing a stone in the water, an act of volunteering really has far-reaching impact, and that's really our focus.
It has like a cascading wave
Exactly,
effect.
exactly.
And how did you become involved with Volunteer Hamilton?
Actually, looking back, in 2012, I was fresh out of university. I came as a newcomer myself to Canada as an international student to pursue education in McMaster. So I was fresh out of university in 2012, and volunteering in university, I did a lot of that, and it got me introduced to the McMaster community. And then when I've graduated, I started thinking, well, if volunteering got me introduced to the McMaster community, maybe volunteering would get me introduced to the Hamilton community, and I was not wrong in that. I approached Volunteer Hamilton with that idea of, being able to connect with different community organizations, and I joined the subcommittee for the Community Builders Breakfast. And that's how I got my feet wet with the organization. That was back in 2012, where I worked with some of the board members to run the 2013.
And now you're on the board.
Yep, now I'm on the board, and I'm actually the chair of this year's committee for the Community Builders Breakfast.
And are you enjoying it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And to be able to see, how it was before and how it is right now, and to work with a lot of like-minded individuals who are equally vested in the community is very inspiring and motivating.
That word vested is an important word, isn't it? Because that's where people feel, really attached and passionate about their community, regardless of what they're doing in it.
Yeah, and it's also a sense of ownership, right? When you volunteer, you want to feel that you're a part of something. They're making a difference, whether it's be something small, like ladling soup in the kitchen, or something even larger, more sophisticated, sitting on a event, volunteering for a subcommittee. So really looking at volunteerism in a wide spectrum, and there's really something for everyone, regardless of your age.
Where do you think volunteerism is going in the future? Do you think we'll be able to maintain our leadership in Canada here in Hamilton?
I think so, absolutely. We have a lot of pioneers, I would say, in the field of volunteerism within the community. There are many emerging groups of young professionals who are looking to further their community in various ways through their own networks, because these are individuals who are very highly attuned in technology, but also have those existing networks with the community. So you have the young professional groups such as Hamilton Hive, which is an umbrella organization of young professional groups, who does a lot of volunteering in themselves to enhance the young professional experience in the city. That is a form of volunteering that where they give their time and energy to make it a holistic experience for young professionals to experience in the city. So, yep, absolutely.
And you talk about young professionals. Do you see, the younger generation? We've talked a lot about that throughout the series, and the importance of that younger generation, because that's our future leadership. Do you see that engagement continuing at a fairly high rate, because they're going to have to, of course, replace the older generation at some point, right?
And really, the younger generation may volunteer differently compared to the older generation, right? It may be they do different kinds of skills-related work. So if you're looking at youth or whatnot, they may volunteer, say, putting up flyers in different areas and doing some administrative work. But there's also different kinds of volunteering where you actually, be a part of an event. For instance, as the committee, the Junos, for instance, had so many volunteers being a part of the event, doing so many different things, right? From as ambassadors to being actually part of the Junos Award event happening on the night. So I really think that there's something for any young person to cut their teeth into and to experience.
And do you think Pan Am is going to sort of attract a lot more volunteers? I know that they've been very successful in attracting volunteers, but I guess, do you think it's going to raise that awareness of volunteerism? Maybe we even hit 60%.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was an article in the Spectator talking about Hamilton exceeding its target and, the number of volunteers. And it just goes to show, right, the caliber of the individuals, and also back to what I said, the vested interest in furthering the community and enhancing the experience and celebrating with everybody.
Now, you yourself, you're our future leadership in the younger generation. Do you get a lot of contacts from your former Mac students and colleagues wanting to jump in and help or wherever?
Yep, indirectly, even because of my background as an international student. I have former colleagues or people that I've worked with in the past as a volunteer coming to me and say, look, we should run a workshop ready to engage international students, and we have done just that. We talked about, what is it in there in the city, what's outside beyond that bubble, and how exactly to get involved. And in fact, there's a new young professional group called Global Hamilton Connect, which is dedicated towards that. So really facilitating opportunities for international students and newcomers with what's there out there in Hamilton. And volunteerism and community engagement is one of the key elements, I would say, that for any international student to thrive in the city and newcomer.
And it's a great
well.
networking opportunity too.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah. It's all about building connections and also gaining the confidence, right? When you think about it, when you volunteer for a certain event or an activity, sometimes you are to do something that allows you to interact with people. Sometimes you may not be the comfort zone, but over time, the more you do it and the more you meet people and you realize that they're just that, people. Sometimes you need to find opportunities for you to gain that level of confidence. And as a former international student myself, I have been able to do that through volunteering. And I say to many other international students right now, it's a low barrier way of gaining your confidence and to practice those soft skills.
Yeah, because the soft skills are very important, aren't they?
Essential, yeah.
And with Volunteer Hamilton, how many people would you have, say, at any one time in your database, roughly?
I would say, there are about 300 on average who are able to find a match at one point through volunteering. We have over 200 nonprofits registered and members, and we have over 350 volunteer opportunities posted at one time.
And do you find that there's a good cross-section of people, like retirees and or people who are still active in their careers? Is there a good kind of cross-section of that?
Yes, because the kind of volunteer opportunities that are posted, they vary. Some of them could require for event coordination, or some of them even public relations, but some of them even more basic. And with the Snow Angels, for instance, you really get a good cross-section of residents who are vested, going back, giving back to the community by giving their time and shovel snow for people in their neighborhood. I myself am a snow angel, and I shovel 2 houses. Sometimes you may feel that you are not doing a big of a deal, but sometimes really you mean a lot to the person because I would get an email forwarded to the coordinator who forwarded it to me and saying that, oh, the person helped me shovel my snow and I'm able to move out my car. So that really means something.
Yeah, so you get a lot of personal satisfaction from it.
Exactly.
What do you think, say, what are the sort of top 2 or 3 really hot areas that people like to volunteer for? Is it United Way? Is it events? What do you think?
I think it varies depending on the demographic as well. And I will also say that, volunteerism and the act of volunteering is also very personal. Because sometimes it may depend on what you want to get out of it. For some people, it may be meeting their 40 hours. But for some people, it may be beyond that, learning a skill, a stepping stone towards, getting your dream job, for instance. And to pinpoint an exact trend on, what exactly is hot or popular, it's hard to say, because if I go out and talk to a volunteer out there, they may have a different idea on what exactly is hot and out there as well.
And if somebody wants to connect with Volunteer Hamilton, how should they do that?
They could do it obviously, by visiting the Volunteer Hamilton website, volunteerhamilton.on.ca. Give them a call, and they're also located at 27 John Street North. So when you go in there to even talk to a person about getting a volunteer opportunity, oftentimes it's not just about, hey, sit down there and do your homework on a database. It's about having that conversation with the person on what exactly that makes them tick and find the right match for it.
Okay, well, that's great, Alyssa. Well, thank you so much for everything you do for the city, and all the best with Volunteer Hamilton.
Thank you for your time, Lael.
Thank you. You've been watching Hamilton Works on Cable 14. Thank you.